gut. Ich habe ein Buch vorgestellt, was ich nicht gelesen habe.
Buchvorstellung. So, Lim. Du schau ein bisschen drauf. Vielleicht so.
Vielleicht. Ist auch nicht schlimm, wenn nicht. Man hört mich.
Ja.
Man sieht mich in Harmonie schmusen mit der Katze.
Also, Roland Dahl, der Twits, gefunden in Hashim, Israel, in der Boutique. Eine kleine Tauschbude am Anfang des 50-Häuser-Dorfes mit wahrscheinlich eher alternativen Leuten. War viel auf Hebräisch da. Hebräisch, nicht Hebräisch, Hebräisch. Da kann man ja mal gar nichts lesen. Aber das ist Englisch, das kann man theoretisch lesen. Ich probiere es mal.
Was heißt der Twits?
Sag ich doch, der Twits.
Ja, was heißt es?
Der Twits?
Ich weiß nicht, was Twits ist.
Wahrscheinlich heißt irgendwas wie fusselige Haare, so.
Ah, ja, okay.
Twits, weißt du, wie
So, Twits.
Dreadlocks.
Ist auch ein Twit.
Twits. Mhm.
Okay.
Mit meiner Lieblingskatze und meinem Lieblingsmuschi dabei. Muschi heißt auch Katze.
Ja.
Einmal das Kätzchen, einmal mein Lieblingsmiezi.
Ich mag den Versuchssuch zu.
Hat meine Oma auch mal zur Katze immer gesagt. So ein haariges kleines Ding halt. Ich glaube, wir müssen mal von vorne anfangen.
Ja.
Ach, was soll's.
Ist eigentlich auch egal, wir sind ja nicht da.
Ja,
Keiner
aber
kann uns böse sein, keiner kann gar nichts.
jetzt einfach eine kleine Buch lesen, weil ich Bock habe vorzulesen. Ich trinke noch einen Kaffee, was eigentlich ein Tee ist. Ist mir egal. Also, Roland Dahl, The Twits. Hairy faces. What a lot of hairy faces, man, there are around nowadays. When a man grows hair all over his face, it is impossible to tell what he really looks like. Perhaps that's why he does it. He'd rather to did it now. Then there is the problem of wishing.
Du liest auf allen Sprachen gleich und ich liebe das an dir.
Finde ich gut. Aber du darfst jetzt nicht mehr ins Buch reinschauen. Hier ist übrigens das Bild von den vielen haarigen Männern und da haben wir auch nochmal einen. Verstehe ich gar nicht. Then there is the problem of washing. When the very hairy ones wash their faces, it must be as big a job as when you and I wash it the hair on our heads. Also es geht ums Bärtchen. Hast du den Satz verstanden? Ich nicht.
Ich glaube nicht, dass es so da steht.
Doch, so steht's da.
Zeig.
When the very hairy ones wash their faces, it must be as big a job as when you and I wash their hair on our heads.
Ich glaube,
Ja,
ich
okay,
verstehe
so
es,
macht's
wenn ich
Sinn.
ihn selber sehe.
Ich lese jetzt vor, dann liest du halt.
Okay.
Das wird das beste Vorlesevideo aller Zeiten. Ich freue mich schon auf die Comments. So what I want to know is this. How often do you all these hairy faces men wash their faces? It is only once a week, like us on Sunday nights. And do they shampoo it? Do they use a hair dryer? Do they rub hair tonic in to stop their faces from going bald? Do they go to a barber to have their hairy faces cut and trimmed, or do they do it themselves in front of the bathroom mirror with nail scissors? Oh, das mache ich heute noch. Ich schneide den Bart noch hier. With the nail scissor. I don't know, but next time you see a man with a hairy face, which will probably be as soon as you step out onto the street, maybe you will look at him more closely and start wondering about some of the things. Okay, jetzt geht's ja richtig los, sobald die Zeit
Warte, mir
aufgeht.
ist was eingefallen, sonst vergesse ich es, wenn es jetzt nicht auch schon gespielt, später Schiff versenken.
Unbedingt. Was man alles macht auf einer Weltreise in Israel. Mr. Twit. Ich mach mal hier gleich. So sieht er aus. Mr. Twit was one of these very hairy-faced men. The whole of his face, except of his forehead, his eyes and his nose, was covered with thick hair. The stuff even sprouted in revolving thoughts out of his nostrils and ear holes. Naja, manche Stellen sind nicht ganz so gut ausgesprochen, du darfst nicht reinschauen.
Ich kann es gar nicht von hier lesen. Sie ist klein.
Good. Mr. Twit felt that his hairiness made him look terrifically wise and grand. But in truth he was neither of the things. Mr. Twit was a twit. He was born a twit, and now at the age of 60 he has a bigger twit than ever. The hair on Mr. Twit's face didn't grow smooth and matted as it does on most hairy-faced men. It grew in spikes that stuck out of straight like the bristles of a nail brush. And how often did Mr. Twit wash the bristly nail brush face of his? The answer is never. Not even on Sunday. He hadn't washed it for years. Dieser Mr. Twit.
Du wäschst es immer.
Dirty birds. Dirty beards. As you know, an ordinary, unhairy face like yours or mine simply get a bit smugly if it is not washed often enough. And there's nothing so awful about it. But a hairy-faced man is very different matter. Things cling to hairs, especially food. Things like gravy go right in among the hairs and stay there. You and I can whip our smooth face with a washcloth and we quickly look more or less right again. But the hairy man cannot do that. We can also, if we are careful, eat our meals without spreading food all over our faces. But not so the hairy man. Watch carefully next time you see a hairy man eating his lunch, and you will notice that even if he opens his mouth very wide, it is impossible for him to get a spoonful of beef stew or ice cream and chocolate sauce into it without leaving some of it on the hairs. Mr. Twit didn't even bother to open his mouth wide when he eat. As a result, and because he never washed, there were always hundreds of bits of old breakfast and lunches and supper sticking on the hairs around his face. They weren't big bits, mind you, because he used to wipe those off with the back of his hand or on his sleeve while he was eating. But if you looked closely, not that you'd ever want to, you would see tiny little specks of dried up scrambled eggs stuck to the hairs, and spinach and tomato ketchup and finger sticks and minced chicken livers and all the other disgusting things Mr. Twit liked to eat. Da haben wir nochmal ein Bild. If you look closer still, hold your nose, ladies and gentlemen. If you peered deep into the mustachy bristles sticking out over his upper lip, you wouldn't probably see much larger objects that had escaped, dropped off his hand, things that had been there for months and months, like a piece of maggoty green cheese, or a mouldy old cornflake, or even the slimy tail of a tinned sardine. Because of all this, Mr. Twit never went really hungry. By sticking out his tongue and curling it sideways to explore the hairy jungle around his mouth, he was always able to find a tasty morsel here and here there to nibble on it. What I'm trying to tell you is that Mr. Twit was a fool and smelly old man. He was also an extremely horrid old man, as you will find out in a moment. Mrs. Twit. Mrs. Twit was no better than her husband. She did not, of course, have a hairy face. It was a pity she didn't, because that, at any rate, would have hidden some of her fearful ugliness. Take a look at her. Geht auch schlimmer.
Geht auch besser.
Have you ever seen a woman with an uglier face than that? I doubt it. But the funny thing is that Mrs. Twit wasn't born ugly. She'd had quite a nice face when she was young. The ugliness had grown upon her year by year as she got older. Why would that happen? I tell you why. If a person has ugly thoughts, it begins to show on the face. And when that person has ugly thoughts, every day, every week, every year, the face gets uglier and uglier until it gets so ugly you can hardly bear to look at it. So sieht's aus. A person who has good thoughts cannot ever be ugly. You can have a wonky nose and a crooked mouth and a dark chin and stick out teeth, but you have good thoughts. They will shine out of your face like sunbeams, and you will always look lovely. Wie die Dame da unten.
Das stimmt, aber das hat eine
Ja.
gute Message.
Mit Aussagen. Nothing good shone out of Mrs. Twit's face. In her right hand she carried a walking stick. She used to tell people that this was because she had warts growing on the sole of her left foot and walking was painful. But the real reason she carried the stick was so that she could hit things with it. Things like dogs and cats and small children. And then there was the glass eye. Mrs. Twit had a glass eye that was always looking on the other way. So, hier mache ich eine Pause.
Mhm. Hast richtig gut gemacht.
Wenn es spannend ist, dann lese ich weiter.
Ich find's gut.
Du findest gut?
Ja, ich find's gut. Wir nehmen das mit und das andere auch.
Okay.
Weil wir so viel Platz haben.
Also, dann gibt es demnächst mehr.
Ist das andere auch von
Mrs. Twit.
Roland da?
Nee, ist was anderes.
Ja, aber es sieht trotzdem sehr ähnlich aus.
Adele.
Ciao.